Follow along in today's video. I'm going to be covering the 10 most common fish disease and ailments. I'll go over a little bit about what each disease actually is, how to diagnose them, and how to treat them using medications, not herbal supplements, actual medications that really are effective and work. First one on the list today is ick. This is maybe the most common one, extremely prevalent when you are buying fish from a fish store and bringing them home. Ick is a protozoan parasite. Protozoan just means that it's a single-celled organism. It's not like a multi-celled worm kind of parasite. It's a little microscopic parasite. It buries itself into the skin or gills of fish, forming these white cysts. So you're actually seeing these tiny salt specks on the fish. Those are the cysts and not the parasite. Parasite is so small you can't see it with your bare eye. When infected, your fish will start to behave a little differently. They'll rub up against objects, rocks, or wood in the tank like they're trying to remove these parasites from them. But no matter how much they do this, it's not an effective way for them to remove the parasites. After being infected for a while, you'll notice that your fish's health is slowly to rapidly declining, breathing heavily, floating along the surface, reduced colors, and just like kind of a crummy looking fish in general. The first thing you should do to treat ick is bump up the temperature to the higher end of the spectrum that your fish will tolerate. Maybe 78 to 86 degrees is kind of the higher end for most fish we keep in fish tanks. Then you want to add in some aquarium salt and some medications. In order to treat ick, I'd recommend you start off with using some aquarium salt, then use some Ick X, which uses the active ingredient of malachite green, or another copper-based medication is really great, cupramine. Even though metronidazole is advertised as being effective against ick, I have not found it to be the case, so I would recommend you avoid that. When treating, make sure that you look at the directions. You'll want to get in there and siphon out the substrate layer, pulling out rocks and wood and stuff like that, so you can really get everywhere. Just in case there's any parasites resting on the substrate, this is a really good way to help reduce the chances of your fish getting reinfected. Internal parasites are a fairly common ailment for fish. The hardest thing about them is because they're internal, they can be difficult to diagnose. Usually we're talking about nematodes, tapeworms, flukes, sometimes internal protozoan parasites. The first sign of trouble that we're going to see is that these fish are losing weight, and usually losing weight really quick. So when you see this starts to happen, you know, hey, you're really feeding your fish enough. It can't be that you're underfeeding. Then your first thought should be, yep, it's going to be an internal parasite. So treat with these 3 medications. Since we don't know what exactly it is, we're going to have to just go in the order that I picked, but you can pick your own order if you want. But the first thing you want to treat with is levamisole. That's going to be the active ingredient in Expel P. Then you want to look at praziquantel. It's the active ingredient in PraziPro. Finally, if neither of those work, you want to look at metronidazole, which is the active ingredient in MetroCleanse. You don't want to be treating with 2 meds at the same time. Try one. If that doesn't work, try the next. If that doesn't work, try the next. You should see relatively quick results. Your fish will immediately look less lethargic after treating with these meds, and sometimes you'll actually see them poop out like a clump of nasty parasite stuff. So again, always make sure to be siphoning out in between treatments everywhere you can get, pulling out decor to get in all those nooks and crannies, and cleaning out your filter as well, because that may have picked up some of these parasites, which could easily end up getting kicked back into the tank, reinfecting your fish. Bloat and dropsy are similar but not similar conditions. They look similar in the sense that your fish puff up, they get bloated and like can't control their buoyancy in the water. Dropsy is a little more severe in the sense that fish can get so bloated that their scales, what you call is like pine coning, the scales pop out like a pine cone rather than laying flat on the fish. This is caused by kidney failure. Once the kidney failure kicks in, the fish doesn't have the ability to regulate its bodily fluids and usually fills up with water, essentially becoming really bloated. It often results in squishing of the swim bladder, which is what fish use to regulate their buoyancy up and down. So now they're fighting multiple things that are causing them to have less control over how they can navigate their world. This is best treated with some aquarium salt and minoxidil, the active ingredient of Maracyn 2. The other ailment that I lumped in this category is bloat. Bloat is very easily confused because the fish puffs up and has a hard time moving around in the water. Bloat, however, is usually more related to diet. If your fish is constipated, then it can result in the swim bladder kind of getting pushed around the body, result in the fish puffing up basically, and also not being able to control where it goes. This is a lot more easily treated. You can use some Epsom salt, which is basically a laxative for fish. It will help them to poop everything out, hold food for 2 or 3 days, and then you want to follow up by feeding them something like really high fibrous, maybe de-shelled peas if your fish will eat it, or some algae flakes, spirulina flakes, something like that. Get them some fibers so they poop everything out and help to relieve that constipation so their swim bladder can get back to place. Columnaris is a fairly common external bacteria that we see on fish. It shows up as like a slimy, mucousy, patchy area, often around the mouth or the gills, maybe on the top of the head to the back of the fish. Not that it has to show up there, but these are the most common spots. It's similar to fungus, except fungus clearly grows external to the fish, wanting to reach out like a fuzzy extension, whereas Columnaris, even though it's got that white kind of external vibe, you can think of it as like trying to grow into the fish, consuming the fish. It's very noticeable looking at the two side by side, the difference. To treat this, I'd recommend you use Canaplex with the active ingredient kanamycin, and then combine that with API furan 2 with the active ingredient nitrofurazone. Using these two in tandem really helps to destroy this bacteria. For whatever reason, I don't know, using one or the other on their own isn't nearly as effective. Hole in head is probably the gnarliest looking fish disease. It's literally what it sounds like, a huge freaking hole just growing on the head of your fish. This is caused by Hexamida, a protozoan parasite. It starts off on the inside of the fish, but once this infection becomes so rampant, it moves to these pores or sensory nodes on the head of a fish. And once it really infects these, it starts eating away, becoming like a body consuming disease. And eventually, you know, this hole can get so big in the fish that it eats away enough of the fish that it kills it. It's truly gruesome, gnarly looking disease. It's most prevalent in South American cichlids and gouramis. Fish in the aquarium that get a little bit larger tend to see this a little more often. It's not something you usually get with little teeny tetras or danios. The best way to treat for this disease is using metronidazole. It's the active ingredient in MetroCleanse. Hole in the head is directly linked to poor water quality or bad living conditions for your fish. While this could be said for any disease or ailment I'm talking about today, particularly so with hole in head. So if you're medicating, you should always think about your water quality or diet for your fish. Look to treat those. It's definitely going to be a likely cause. Fin and tail rot is another one that looks exactly like it sounds. Basically, the fins and tail start to rot away. It initially shows up as like kind of a white edging margin around the tail and fin, and then it slowly starts to eat away. In extreme cases, what we'll see is just like a spike or a thread of the fin that's left. Fin rot can be treated relatively easy with the use of some aquarium salt and erythromycin, the active ingredient in Maracyn. I already talked about flukes briefly in the internal parasite section, but there are other types of flukes that manifest completely differently. Those are external flukes. They tend to impact either the skin or more commonly the gills on a fish. Now, these guys are so small. They're not exactly microscopic in perfect conditions. You could see them with your bare eye, but when attached to the fish, they're almost impossible to see. When a fish has gill flukes, they start to breathe really quickly. Their gills are just flapping away and they look like they're hyperventilating because these parasites in their gills are stopping them from absorbing oxygen essentially. And then their gills extend out of their body a little bit. Notably different. These gills are all the way outside of the body, flapping away. That's a huge sign that you have gill flukes. Skin flukes, little bit harder to diagnose because there are tons of ailments that can cause a fish to rub up on stuff, but kind of the giveaway is that they start to fade in color and they get this mucousy, slimy appearance because their immune system is all out of whack with these skin flukes all on the outside of their body. Fortunately, flukes are a really easy parasite to treat. We just need to use some praziquantel in there, the active ingredient in PraziPro. Everyone knows what fungus looks like. We've seen that mold growing on our bread. It's going to show up on our fish as a whitish color, very fuzzy, growing on top of the fish, not really buried in like Columnaris. It's really an external thing. Fungus is something that occurs as a secondary infection. Maybe two of your fish got into a fight, one of them swam into a rock and scraped up its body, or it bumped its head on the glass and there's an open wound. These wounds are particularly susceptible to fungal infections. It's not like this fungus is likely to just appear on the outside of a healthy fish. It really needs some sort of a foothold and opening in the body to take advantage of. So we want to keep healthy, clean water moving around. That's one way we can help to treat it. And then the other thing we can use is sodium chlorite, which is the active ingredient in Maracyn oxy. I've already talked about bacteria a little bit with regards to fin rot, but there's also just the general manifestation of a bacterial infestation in a fish. Hazy eyes, sometimes so bad that they start to pop out. Messed up fins, like I mentioned earlier. We have discolored bodies, sometimes a bit of a swollen anus, swollen abdomen that's like pinched off right behind the stomach, you know, like a flatter back half of the fish, and then a swollen front half is a good indicator. Slimy coat is a very common symptom of bacterial infection. There's many different meds to treat a bacterial infection, and because there's so many different types, sometimes you have to try a few different ones in order to get the right result. So the first one I would go with is erythromycin. That's going to be the active ingredient in Maracyn. If that doesn't work, you're going to want to jump to a dual treatment using kanamycin, the active ingredient of Canaplex, and nitrofurazone, the active ingredient of API furan 2. If you're noticing that your fish's gills aren't functioning well, they're really red, or they're at the surface and having a hard time breathing, it's probably one of two causes. The first one is ammonia burn. Ammonia can literally burn a fish's gills, making them unable to function properly, which essentially causes them to suffocate. That's why they're up at the top of the tank, gasping, trying to get some oxygen in there. So I shouldn't have to say this, but you don't want ammonia in your tank. Ammonia is bad. That's like fish keeping 101. Do not put fish in a tank with ammonia. Even other stuff like nitrates, which isn't great for them, they can tolerate, but any ammonia is going to jack their gills up big time. So that's easily solved by doing a water change and making sure that you've completed your nitrogen cycle, you're not overfeeding your fish, all that sort of stuff. The second one is just simply low oxygen content in your tank. If you don't run a filter, or you have a really slow moving filter with some dead pockets in your tank, then oxygen levels can drop. It's a real easy solution to just drop an air stone in the tank and let the oxygen flow. There's a couple things I want to talk about when medicating your fish. First of all, you always want to turn off your UV sterilizer if you're using one, and then remove any sort of charcoal or purigen, some sort of ammonia absorbing materials. Those things are going to cancel out most medications. You're going to be throwing your money away and not helping your fish. Next, you usually want to bump up the temperature in your tank to the higher end of the range your fish will tolerate. That's because it boosts their immune system. When you do this, you also need to make sure you're feeding them more. If their metabolism's going faster, boosting their immune system, that also means they need to eat more to fuel that increase in bodily functions. The other thing that happens when you raise the temperature is you speed up the life cycle of the parasites. Some of these parasites have life cycle stages where they're susceptible to medication, and other life cycle stages where they're not. So by increasing that life cycle stage, you get to the point where medication can be effectively used sooner. If it takes longer, that's just more time where your fish is being attacked by these parasites. If you're treating for any internal issues, it's a good idea to feed the meds to your fish. All you got to do is add in 1 part medication, 1 part C-Chem Focus, and then drop it in your frozen food. Let it sit there for 5 minutes after mixing it up, then drop it in the tank. I always use an air stone when medicating. Some medications will specifically call it out. Must use air stone, depletes oxygen. Even other ones that don't say that will sometimes have the same result. I actually lost a couple minnows one time when I was medicating. I can't remember what it was, but I know it said you didn't need the extra oxygen. Now I just don't take any chances. Anytime I medicate, air stone. Also, more oxygen helps your fish to be healthier and fight off sicknesses more. Absolutely always read over the medication instructions. Sometimes there's very specific things. This video just covers the whole slew of things, and I'm not getting into the nitty-gritty details of how to dose. So read the medication directions very, very closely and follow them. Dosing higher medication doesn't mean that your fish are going to get healthier faster, right? It's not like cooking where you cook higher and things cook better, right? Don't do that. I'm just kidding. The last thing I want to touch on is, why are your fish getting sick, right? There's some fish that are susceptible to certain illnesses like discus, just get sick with everything all the freaking time. But then there's other things. Bettas tend to get fin or tail rot. Goldfish can have swim bladder issues sometimes. So do your research, know what your fish are most susceptible to. Then you can have those meds on standby. Always a good idea to be prepared, because once your fish gets sick, then you got to go to your local store and find it. Oh, they don't have it. Then you're waiting 3 or 4 days. Instead, you could just be treating your fish immediately. The other reasons your fish get sick, one is you just bought this fish. That's the most stressful time of a fish's life, going from the breeder or the supplier to the fish store, and then from the fish store to your home. These are times where you always want to be vigilant looking at your fish. If you want to avoid that problem, then just get a quarantine tank. You can even treat them with the 3 big internal parasite meds as a precautionary thing. That's not a bad idea. And then poor animal husbandry is really another big reason that fish get ill, right? If the fish has a poor diet or bad water quality, then it's much more likely to get sick if they're being well taken care of. This is really something I can't emphasize enough. healthy fish don't get sick as often as unhealthy fish. Last but not least is setting up a good habitat for your fish. Stress cannot be underestimated. Stress will eat away at a fish's immune system. Maybe they got a fish that's bullying them, or the tank is too light. They like dark, shadowy conditions, or maybe there's too much flow and the fish is constantly fighting it. Habitat will make or break a fish's health. Anyways, that's all I got today. Let me know, is there something that you think is really important for fish health or a big disease I missed? Drop a comment, let me know. If you learned something or enjoyed today's video, hit that like, subscribe, all that stuff that helps me in my algorithm game. I really appreciate it. Watch some other videos. I'll leave some relevant links on how to maintain good water quality, grow healthy plants, and all that sort of stuff in the comment or description, stuff that will help you take better care of your fish. Want to support me financially? Buy something through an affiliate link. Really appreciate your support. Until next time, see ya.